Enlightenment Garden coming to you from the Phoenix, Arizona area, Garden Zone 9B. We are in mid-April 2023, and if you are growing roses like me here in a warm climate, you know April to May is the prime time for bloom on your roses. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to give you a tour. Starting out, People's Princess. We have Ingrid Bergman. This variety is Deja Blu, the only Mini-Flora that I have in the garden. This is covered with clusters of roses. Unlike the hybrid teas, each stem has anywhere between 6 to a dozen roses on it. And Mini-Floras, in my experience, don't grow real high. The bush stays compact and more wide, like a shrub. This variety is good as gold. Solid yellow gold initially on the bloom, and as it matures, develops that pink tinge around the petals. Perfume Delight. Solid pink, very fragrant, large petaled rose. Spice Coffee. See an unusual beige color with hints of yellow, and then in cooler times you'll also see lavender. This variety is JFK, solid white rose. Summers in general do affect white roses more adversely than other colors. They tend to burn up, so if you can, plant your white rose in a location that's going to provide afternoon shade, or at least some filtered light. This is Fragrant Cloud. As the name implies, this is a intensely fragrant rose. The pink to orange coloration. Here we have a bright pink colored rose called Lasting Love. Classic red rose, Mr. Lincoln. One of my favorites, intensely fragrant. Solid red color. This particular bush has been in ground for 7 years now in my backyard and does tend to want to grow tall. So you will have to head this back quite a bit to keep it into more of a bush form. So as you can see in this rose garden, I do have hardscape down around the roses. There's a gravel pathway with flagstone, but the roses themselves are planted in a berm with at least 6 inches of pine mulch. And that really helps to keep the roots from drying out, retain moisture, and of course adds to healthy soil. This is a hybrid tea rose called Zulu Royal. It's a South African variety. Purple bloom. It's more intense purple initially when the bud comes out and then lightens as the bud matures. This too is a very vigorous variety. You can see it's quite tall as compared to my other bushes. All of these were trimmed to the same height, yet you can see some of them are definitely more aggressive in their growth than others, and this is one of those. This also puts on a very nice, strong fragrance. Here we have Chicago Peace. Gorgeous coloring. You can see layers of color in it. Yellows, pinks, oranges. Large bloom. Doesn't have much of a fragrance, but a beautiful colored rose. This hybrid tea is Muzi-Lucia. It's my youngest in my collection. This one's only been in ground for less than a year. Nice fragrance level on it. Again, beautiful coloring. Has different shades of pink to it, as well as some cream coloration swirled into the petal. And just to quickly mention, all of these roses I feed organically, have for the last few years. I used to use a synthetic, but now I really resort to just feeding them alfalfa pellets once every 6 to 8 weeks. In addition to the alfalfa, once a year, generally in fall, I'll put down an application of bone meal, and that provides the phosphorus they need to set blooms. don't need to overdo it on phosphorus just because phosphorus stays in the soil. It's more the nitrogen that roses need on a constant basis. So the alfalfa provides a good ratio of that. This red rose is Firefighter, another hybrid tea. Very intense fragrance, similar to Mr. Lincoln. And another fairly vigorous grower. Another classic hybrid tea rose, Chrysler Imperial. Deeply fragrant red rose. And also another vigorous grower. You can see it's wanting to reach above that 6-foot wall. This solid yellow rose is aptly called the yellow. Nice waxy leaves. Blooms well even in the high heat of the summer. But there is no fragrance to this rose. So as someone that grows their own food, I not only have roses in the garden for the beauty that they provide and the fragrance, but also for all of the beneficial insects and pollinators that they bring into the yard. So that helps with fruit set on my fruit trees and just adds to the overall polyculture in the yard. Another light colored rose, giver of hope. Similar to JFK, this one will suffer burn to the petal in the heat of the summer. This rose also tends to suffer more damage from thrips when the heat comes on. So thrips basically suck the moisture out of the bud, and for whatever reason they are attracted to the lighter colored roses. So here's an example of a rose that has had some thrips damage. Even though I do spray these roses occasionally with spinosad, when I see damage, it's hard to eradicate them. But you can see the thrips have caused some damage to the outer petal here. It browns the edges. So I'll link that video where I talk about chili thrips and controlling them in your garden. While we're fortunate that we don't have to deal with the fungus issues, powdery mildew that other climates may deal with, we do have to contend with thrips and aphids also at this time of the year. So if you're noticing those little green bugs on your roses, a good way to deal with aphids that's also organic is to just fill a bottle with water, a spray bottle with water, and a couple drops of dish soap will basically suffocate aphids and instantly treat your bush. This is another Ingrid Bergman, my second bush here in the garden. And finally we have Oklahoma. This is also a newer bush that I put in last year. Another red rose. Unlike the other red roses I've showed you, this one has a deeper red coloring. almost borders on burgundy. And Oklahoma has its parentage with Chrysler Imperial. So intensely fragrant as well. Hope you enjoyed the walkthrough of the roses in the garden. I've been growing all of these varieties that I showed you anywhere between around a year to 7 years in the ground. For roses to look their best, they do require pretty much constant care as far as deadheading the old blooms, keeping up on your fertilization, pruning them throughout the season so they don't get too leggy, especially during monsoon season. If a rose is too high up in the air, monsoon winds can come through and break branches, so it is good to keep them somewhat compact. As far as watering goes, I try to just keep the top 6 inches of soil moist. To achieve a 6-inch depth of moisture in your yard most likely will differ from mine, depending on a variety of factors like the solar aspect, the variety, even how old the rose is, your soil drainage, how much mulch you apply, many different factors at play there. But essentially what I'd recommend is get a piece of rebar, and after you irrigate your roses, plunge that into your soil and see how far it'll go. If you've achieved more than 6 inches, you can back off the volume of water you're putting down. If you're not quite at that level, then you want to play with that, increase the volume until you can plunge that moisture stick or rebar that far in. Especially when these roses are dealing with triple digits, you don't want to water starve them. You really don't want them to dry out in between cycles. That's going to put them through stress and could cause limb dieback. As with any planting, when you go to put a rose in the ground, make sure you have good draining soil. What I mean by that is if you can fill your planting hole and that water is gone, drains through the soil, within an hour or so, you have good drainage. If you don't have that, then you'll want to work at that. You might need to add some pumice, to add drainage, better drainage. You might want to add some decomposed granite. Mix that in with your native clay soil. Do you have any questions, please pop them into the comments section and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks for watching and happy gardening.